There are people who never understand mercy except as weakness. They do not see kindness as character. They see it as access. Every time you move closer, they take more. Every time you forgive, they push further. And one day you wake up and realize something painful. Your energy is gone. Your time is gone. Your peace is gone. And even your respect for yourself has started to fade. That is the moment many people misunderstand. They think firmness means cruelty. They think distance means hatred. They think saying enough is somehow a betrayal of goodness. But sometimes what looks like hardness on the outside is actually wisdom protecting what is sacred on the inside. Not every heart is changed by softness. Not every soul is corrected by patience. Some people do not become better because you prayed for them, excused them, or endured them. They only change when they realize that you are no longer available for harm. They only adjust their behavior when they understand that your kindness has a boundary, that your dignity has a line, and that crossing that line carries a cost. This is where many sincere people suffer. They keep believing that one more chance will fix what many chances never fixed. They keep offering explanations to people who have no intention of understanding. They keep reopening doors that should have been closed the first time disrespect entered through them. The tragedy is not that others hurt us. The deeper tragedy is that we sometimes cooperate with our own exhaustion by refusing to face what is obvious. We smile, overlook, justify, and tell ourselves maybe they are tired, maybe they are wounded, maybe tomorrow will be different. But the days pass, the pattern repeats, and the damage grows quietly. The wound is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is subtle. A heaviness in your chest when their name appears, a strange tension when they come near, a tiredness you cannot explain, a shrinking inside your spirit that tells you something is wrong, even when your mouth is still trying to call it patience. There are personalities that do not respect you because you are gentle. They respect you only when they feel you are capable of refusal, capable of saying no without trembling, capable of withholding access without guilt. These souls are not disciplined by affection alone. They are disciplined by limits. And every time you remain silent in the face of a small offense, you are teaching the other person a lesson, whether you realize it or not. The lesson is simple. This boundary can be crossed. Then what began as a small violation becomes a habit, and what should have been basic respect becomes optional. This is why unguarded kindness can become a slow form of self-erasure. You begin to feel drained, but you tell yourself you are overreacting. You begin to feel unseen, but you call yourself too sensitive. You begin to feel used, but you force yourself to be understanding. In reality, you are not exaggerating. You are noticing too late what your heart tried to tell you from the beginning. The heart often recognizes harm before the mind is willing to admit it. But many people train themselves to ignore those first warnings until the soul becomes crowded with resentment. And this is where firmness becomes mercy. Not mercy toward the one who keeps crossing the line, but mercy toward the self Allah entrusted to your care. Firmness here is not screaming, not revenge, not humiliation, and not a cold desire to punish. It is something far more mature than that. It is clarity. It is measured distance. It is quiet restraint. It is refusing to keep explaining a truth that should have been respected the first time. It is protecting your heart before your kindness turns into regret. It is making your dignity a red line that is not negotiated, not manipulated, and not traded for temporary peace. Many people confuse harshness with strength, but harshness is often just wounded emotion with a louder voice. True firmness is calmer than that. It does not need to perform. It does not need to threaten. It simply stands where it stands and refuses to move. The difference is profound. Cruelty wants to break the other person. Wisdom wants to prevent further damage. Cruelty leaves you with guilt after it is done, but principled firmness, even when painful, leaves a strange peace in the heart, because deep down you know you did not act to destroy anyone. You acted to stop destruction from continuing. One of the biggest mistakes people make in relationships is waiting too long to draw the line. They imagine that delaying the conversation is preserving harmony, but what they are really doing is sending a silent message that the behavior is acceptable. The first time you excuse what should have been confronted, you plant the seed of future disrespect. And disrespect rarely arrives all at once. It enters gradually. A cutting word here, a dismissive attitude there, a manipulation disguised as sadness, a selfish pattern disguised as need. At each step, the person watches your response. Will you object, or will you absorb it? Will you protect your space, or will you explain their behavior back to yourself in softer language? If you remain silent too long, you eventually fall into a painful trap. Either you keep enduring and slowly lose yourself, or you finally speak after years of buildup and are accused of being dramatic, unstable, or unfair. The other person says, "Why now? Why didn't you say anything before?" And suddenly you are defending your pain instead of addressing their behavior. This is why early boundaries are mercy. They preserve respect before resentment accumulates. They prevent the explosion that happens when years of swallowed discomfort finally demand a voice. Not every offense requires ending a relationship, but every offense deserves awareness. Some relationships do not need abandonment. They need recalibration. They need new terms, new limits, a new balance. But that only works if the other person is willing to honor those limits. If they refuse, then distance is no longer cruelty. It becomes the natural consequence of continued disrespect. And that is something many people need to hear. Distance is not always punishment. Sometimes it is simply truth taking its rightful place. There is also a form of strength that many people underestimate, and that is silence. Not the silence of fear, but the silence that comes after clarity. With some people, more words do not bring more understanding. More words only provide more material for manipulation. They are not listening to understand you. They are listening for openings, for loopholes, for phrases they can twist later. In such cases, endless explanation weakens your message. A truth repeated too many times becomes an invitation for debate. And some truths were never meant to be debated. They were meant to be respected. The conscious withdrawal from pointless argument is not weakness. It is intelligence. It unsettles people who are used to controlling the conversation. It deprives toxic dynamics of the fuel they rely on, your reactions, your tears, your defense, your need to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. When you speak once, clearly, then step back, the balance of power changes. Quietly, without spectacle, without chaos. Suddenly, the person can no longer feed on your emotional labor, and whether they adjust or disappear, you lose less than you were losing before. There is another truth hidden inside all of this, and it is the truth of dignity. Many people treat dignity like a luxury, something secondary that can be postponed in order to preserve relationships. But dignity is not a decorative quality. It is part of the soul's structure. When you repeatedly accept humiliation, mockery, disregard, or emotional erosion, you do not simply lose moments, you lose pieces of your inner stability. Dignity is not arrogance. It is not demanding perfection from others. It is simply refusing to live where your humanity is repeatedly dishonored. Protecting your dignity is not a betrayal of faith. It is part of faith, rightly understood. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was the most merciful of people, yet mercy never meant allowing truth to be trampled. Mercy never meant surrendering honor to repeated abuse. There is a difference between patience with hardship and tolerance for degradation. One elevates the believer, the other hollows the believer out from within. And many people remain in painful relationships not because they are noble, but because they are afraid. Afraid of being called difficult, afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of losing someone they should have stopped losing themselves for long ago. That is why sometimes the most merciful decision is the hardest one. Sometimes the kindest thing you can say is, "Stop here." Sometimes the most honest act is not to repair what has become committed to harming you, but to walk away from it with dignity. Leaving does not always mean failure. Sometimes leaving is the first truthful thing that has happened in that relationship for a very long time. You gave chances, you explained, you endured, you waited. And when none of it changed the reality, staying was no longer loyalty. It became self-betrayal wearing the language of virtue. Healthy endings are often quieter than people expect. They are not always dramatic. They are not always full of confrontation. Sometimes they are simply the result of an inward awakening. You realize that your peace has become too expensive in this relationship. You realize that your presence is being treated as a convenience, not an honor. You realize that what you kept calling love has become mostly endurance. And in that moment, walking away is not revenge. It is restoration. Even then, the hardest part is not setting the boundary. The hardest part is holding it. Many people say no today and undo it tomorrow because guilt knocks on the door, because loneliness whispers, because the other person suddenly becomes softer when they feel access slipping away. But this is where real steadiness is born. A boundary that collapses under emotional pressure teaches others that your limits are temporary. And once people learn that, they stop respecting your words and start testing your endurance instead. Steadiness is not stubbornness. It is consistency between what your heart knows and what your life allows. When you remain firm, some people will accuse you of cruelty, but often what they are grieving is not your transformation into someone harsh. They are grieving the loss of unrestricted access to your patience. They are disturbed not because you harmed them, but because you stopped allowing harm. That distinction matters. Not every complaint against you is proof that you are wrong. Sometimes it is proof that your boundary is finally being felt, and with time, something beautiful happens. You become quieter inside, clearer, lighter. You no longer spend your nights replaying conversations, wondering why you stayed silent, why you explained so much, why you allowed what your soul rejected. One timely sentence can save you years of internal damage. One clear boundary can spare your heart from countless invisible wounds. One dignified exit can return you to yourself after a long season of disappearing. In the end, not everyone deserves the softest version of you. Some people honor mercy and become better through it. Those people are a blessing. But others only know how to consume what is gentle until nothing remains. With them, firmness is not the opposite of goodness. It is the guardian of goodness. Because kindness without wisdom is not virtue. It is vulnerability without protection. And dignity without boundaries is only a beautiful idea that cannot survive contact with harmful people. So remember this well. Your strength is not proven by how much pain you can tolerate. Your strength is proven by how clearly you recognize what dishonors your soul and how courageously you refuse to build a life around it. There are moments when softness heals, and there are moments when only distance does. There are people who deserve your tenderness, and there are people who will only understand your absence. Knowing the difference is not coldness. It is maturity, it is self-respect, and sometimes it is the purest form of mercy Allah allows a heart to learn.